Good evening, everyone. I am Jarold Alexander, and I shall be your presenter. So there are my information or details, and then we shall move on to our next slide. So on our agenda, we have our CAPS-related background to process writing stages, the differences between essay and transactional writing requirements, descriptive essay and informal request letter, and then we have our conclusion, and finally our references. So when we move on to our next slide, we have the background to process writing. So the CAPS document on page 35 defines writing as a powerful instrument of communication. So what does this actually enable learners or expect learners to do? So frequent writing practice across a variety of contexts, tasks, and subjects enables learners to communicate functionally and creatively. Writing is important because it enables learners to think about grammar and spelling. So, for instance, we cannot write about something that we do not know of. Therefore, we take it to the writing process to help us to get used to what is expected of us. For example, the grammar, the spelling, the errors that we make, and therefore the writing process is actually very important to help with those issues that learners face with. So there are 5 stages of process writing. The first stage involves the pre-writing stage. So the pre-writing stage or the planning stage involves brainstorming of ideas. So learners, before they even put pen to paper, they think, they wonder about ideas on a certain topic that they have selected or received, and they think about what they can write about, how they can write about this, and all the ideas associated with this topic, whether it is relevant, whether it is important information that they can include. And before they actually start writing, they jot down those points or ideas. Our second stage is the drafting stage. So this is where we actually put pen into work. So the drafting stage includes the process of placing the ideas into words. So learners write down these ideas, these thoughts, and they structure them in a way that they divide up the information into different sections. For example, different paragraphs, and each idea that they have, they will divide into a different paragraph. And all of these paragraphs also need to be ironed out or straightened out in a specific order, so that when we read what they have written down, that it does not clash in that sense, where this information is supposed to become more relevant or first in the order or in that sense. So drafting is when they start putting pen to paper and putting these words down and putting them into the correct places. Our next stage is revising. So revising is a very important stage, as learners actually have to go back and have to double check if everything is correct, if they have put the different paragraphs in order, if all the sentences are in the correct order. And it is very important to revise our work, because we can see where we went wrong, or what still needs to be added, or what needs to be removed. So we continue on to the fourth stage, which is editing. So editing is also a very important stage. So editing involves correcting punctuation, spelling, grammatical errors, and the use of contractions. So editing, learners go back, they fix their spelling mistakes, they correct their grammar, they check for the correct punctuations, if they punctuation marks, if they've left out a full stop, a comma. They also check if they have not written the same word twice next to one another. Contractions is also a very important one, where learners use the words it's instead of it is, that they could also go and fix and edit those mistakes as well. So editing is also a very important stage in the writing process or process writing. And that leads us to our final stage, which is publishing. So publishing, in plain and simple terms, the learners present the final piece of writing. So they write everything neatly, and then they publish or submit their final work. So that is the stages of process writing. So when we move on to the essay writing requirements. So the essay format consists of 3 sections. So it's the introduction, where the reader is introduced to the topic and what will follow in this essay. The body is made up of different paragraphs, and each paragraph has got its own subheading or a subtopic, if you want to call it that. And then finally, the conclusion is where you round off all the things that you have mentioned in the essay, and then you end off your essay in your conclusion. I always tell the learners that you do not add any new information in your conclusion. If you want to add any information, then it has to go into the body and add information into the body, one of the paragraphs that you might edit or so. So the essays are divided into 5 different types, which are namely our narrative essay, our descriptive essay, our reflective essay, discursive essay, and argumentative essay. So those are the 5 types of essays that we have in the English language. So when it comes to word requirements, so on page 48 of our CAPS document, we find the word requirements. So the first one for the senior phase is the grade 7s. So grade 7 word requirements for essay writing is between 150 to 200 words. So the next one is grade 8s. So they write, or they are supposed to write, between 200 and 250 words. And then lastly, in the senior phase, we have our grade 9s, which writes, or is supposed to write, 250 words to 300 words. So those are our writing requirements for the senior phase, for our grade 7, 8s, and 9s. And our essay consists out of 20 marks. Time allocation afforded to our essay writing is actually 60 minutes, which is an hour, and the learners have an hour to write the required number of words depending on their respective grade that they are in, and that is worth 20 marks. So I've got an example of an essay question, and it reads as follows. So this is a discursive essay. So a discursive essay actually provides the different perspectives. You can have positives and negatives. You can have strengths and weaknesses depending on the topic of the essay. So our example reads there, write a discursive essay discussing both the positives and negatives of gamified language learning. So there is our example of an essay question. Let us move on to our next slide. So our next slide is transactional writing requirements. We already looked at our essay writing requirements. Now we shall look at our transactional writing requirements. So unlike essay writing, transactional writing is based on real life experiences, and it is factual. So it provides information or facts. So that is our transactional text. So the texts are an exchange between the writer and the audience, which gives it the name transactional writing. So there is an exchange happening between the writer and the audience. So transactional texts have got the different formats, and there are different types of transactional texts. So for example, we have letters, which can be formal letters, they can be informal letters. We've got our reports, we've got our diary entries, dialogues, and reviews. So the word requirements for transactional writing or transactional text in the CAPS document is found on page 48. And our first grade there that we have is our grade 7s. So the word requirement for grade 7 transactional writing is 120 to 140 words in total. And then our grade 8 is the next one, which involves them writing 140 words to 160 words in total. And then lastly, in our senior phase, we have our grade 9. So our grade 9s have the requirement of writing 160 words to 180 words for their transactional texts. So our transactional text is awarded 10 marks, and now paper 3, which consists out of 30 marks, 20 marks from the essay, and then 10 marks from our transactional text, which will give us a total of 30 marks for our paper 3 in our respective grades. And then time allocation, learners are awarded 30 minutes to write a transactional text, and this falls under all the grades in the senior phase from grade 7 to grade 9. So they have 30 minutes to complete their transactional writing. So there is also an example of a transactional text question. So it reads as follows. Your English teacher would like to know more about the benefits of gamified language learning. And here are the instructions. Write a dialogue of 160 to 180 words. 160 to 180 words. Those are the requirements of grade 9. So this is a grade 9 transactional writing question. So, and it reads, and it continues, explaining the benefits of gamified language learning to improving English reading results to your English teacher. So that is worth 10 marks if it had to be in a exam question paper. And when we move on to our next slide, we are looking at our descriptive essay and how we can use a descriptive essay to teach process writing. So our topic or our description of a descriptive essay is that it describes an object, a person, a place, or an event. So that is the definition of a descriptive essay, where it describes a person, an object, a place, or an event. So when it comes to our planning phase or planning stage, we receive the topic, the excitement of gaming for language learning. So that is our topic. The excitement of gaming for language learning is our topic. So in our planning stage, learners actually visualize how they are going to write this experience, as it is a descriptive essay. So they have to describe this type of situation or event. And in this case, the topic given to us is the excitement of gaming for language learning. So they have to put down all the thoughts or the excitement that comes to them when they think about gaming or language learning. Our next stage involves drafting. So learners will break up the different ideas into different paragraphs, and each paragraph will deal with a certain subheading or subtopic in that case. So learners have to break up the topics, ideas into paragraphs, and then we'll have to complete that. So revising, as previously mentioned, revising is very important. Learners have to double check the information on the topic and make sure that there are no spelling errors, punctuation errors, grammar errors, and they have to go and double check if all the paragraphs are in the correct order, if the sentence structure is also in the correct order, and all of those things that they also have to fix. When we're looking at editing for this topic, So learners fix the errors and sentence structure, which is very important because we want learners to know the correct grammar to use as well as the errors that they do and all of that so that they can fix what they have done incorrectly. And then finally, after editing, we have our final stage, which is publishing, which will the learners will write the essay neatly for the final draft, and then they will submit their final draft. So when we move on to our next slide, we are looking at informal request letter. So our first stage again of process writing is our planning stage. So our planning stage involves learners to think about the approach and to write their teacher to include a gaming class activity. So that is our topic for this one. So they have to think about how they are going to approach this question where they need to write to the teacher to include a gaming class activity. So before they look at writing anything down, they have to plan which type of register will I use, which type of tone, because they are writing to a teacher. We can't have slang, informal language when we are writing to a teacher. So it is also very important for learners to acknowledge before they start writing that they should choose the correct language to use, for example, the register, the tone, and that is very important. And that happens in the planning stage. So when we look at our next one, it is our drafting stage. So learners decide which tone and the register is appropriate for the letter. So before we had to look at the planning, how they're going to approach it, and now we have to put those words, those ideas into a proper writing piece. So the learners start writing, choosing the correct tone when they're writing down their paragraphs, when they're writing down their letters, and the register also is very important. So in the drafting stage, they are writing this letter, organizing the correct structure of an informal letter. There's only one address and the recipient that they are writing to, the date. All of those things need to be included there. And yes, those are what happens in our drafting stage. So our editing stage, so learners again have to go backtrack or check for the mistakes and errors. For example, if there's structural errors that they have to fix, if they have not written the correct structure of the address or where the address comes, how the paragraphs are structured, and how they conclude their informal letters. For example, some learners might write kind regards, some of them write yours faithfully, and they just have to check if everything is in the correct order, in the correct sequence, especially when it comes to our transactional texts, because our structure is very important for our transactional text. And then our next one is revising. So learners check if the structure of the letter is correct. As previously mentioned, that the address is in the correct place, who they are writing to, the date, if the salutation is in order, if the conclusion, the ending, all of those type of things are in order. And then after revising, we have our publishing. So learners write the letter neatly, and then they also submit their final draft. So in conclusion, Parody 2024 describes a writing process as the way of breaking down the task of writing into smaller parts or components. So there are a few benefits to the writing process that I have added. So the first one involves the pre-writing or planning stage, helps learners to map out the ideas and organize all ideas. So in the pre-planning stage, learners actually organize the information. They put everything in the correct sequence, in the correct order. so that they are able to make that easier for themselves when they actually start writing. So it actually gives them a blueprint of what to do before they actually start putting pen to paper, so that they have everything that they need before they start writing. So that is one the first benefit that we have. Our second one there is learners can structure and label their writing, making writing easier. So learners can actually put everything in the correct structure, and then they can also name or label their writing. For example, paragraph one will deal with this subheading, paragraph two with this one. And then when they actually start their writing, it makes it very easy for them to put all the sentences under the correct subheadings and paragraphs. Our third benefit there is that process writing helps learners envision goals for their produce and be able to set standards. So learners can visualize what they would like to achieve and how they want their product to look like at the end of the day. And this also helps learners with their imagination and their thinking skills, their cognitive skills. And this also gives them something to work towards because they set their own standards, and that also motivates learners also to do better in that sense. And then our fourth benefit there is that learners also have the benefit of criticizing their own work. So that is where we spoke about revising and editing, where those are very important, where learners actually sit down and they analyze and they look at their own work, they criticize it, and then they learn from their mistakes, they fix their mistakes, and then in through that process, they also learn through the mistakes that they have made. And then finally, we have our references there. And that is it from me. So everyone, thank you so much for your time. I am Jarold Alexander, and have a great evening further. Thank you.